Today I'm going to show you how to take a basic shirt like this and attach lace cuffs to the sleeves. If you sew your own clothes, attaching lace is a lot easier before you sew the sleeve seams. But in this video, I wanted to show you how to attach lace to an existing shirt. It's really fun if you have a basic shirt like this that you want to make a little cuter. If you have a stretchy fabric like this, you're going to want to use stretch lace. This is a type of lace called galloon, and it's actually a lingerie lace, but I like it because it has scalloped edges. That means you don't need to hem the lace, and you can just use this as the edge. The first thing you want to do is actually try on your shirt. If you're doing a long sleeve shirt like me, you're probably going to have to cut off some of the length. I like to fold the shirt under and then hold my lace up to the shirt edge. This helps you decide how much you need to cut off of the shirt before attaching the lace. When cutting your sleeve, you do want to keep the seam allowance in mind, so make sure you give yourself an extra inch when you're cutting. When you're using scalloped lace, keep in mind that you're going to have to sew along the indent of the scallop. So when you're pulling this up, just keep that in mind, lining it up. And to me, that looks like about the right length. So now I'm going to take tailor's chalk and mark on the shirt. This will be my fold line. So when I cut, I'm going to give myself a little bit of extra room so I can have a nice hem. This is just a rough marking, and when I cut, I'll use a ruler so it's nice and straight. You only need to mark on one sleeve, and then you can use that cut off piece to measure how much to cut off the other sleeve. So here I have my sleeve laid out, and I'm just going to make sure it's nice and straight, and that the seam is laying straight on top of itself. And then I'm going to use a straight ruler to cut that piece off. Now remember, this is my fold line, so I'm just going to cut beneath it so I have enough room for my hem. So now I'm going to use this piece to measure how much to cut off the other sleeve. For the next step, you're going to need an iron. We're going to fold this under by 1/2 inch. And we're going to press. If your lace has any wrinkles in it, you're going to want to press this as well. Keep in mind that most lace is made from synthetic fibers, so you'll probably have to turn the temperature down on your iron, otherwise this will melt. So here I have my sleeves pressed under, and the next step is to cut the lace. You can decide whether you want your lace on the outside like this, or if you want it to go inside the sleeve. Either way, you'll want your lace to be as wide as your shirt sleeve, but you have to keep in mind the seam allowance when you're cutting your lace out. So my sleeve opening is about 4.5 inches wide. If you're not sure how long to cut your lace, it's always a good idea to cut it a little bit longer because you can always re-sew it and trim off the excess later. After cutting your lace, the next step is to pin the pieces right side together. Finding the right side of lace can be a little bit challenging, but usually the wrong side has more of a matte finish. I actually like using quilting clips instead of pins. Pins are really hard to get into lace because there's so many holes. So here I have my cuff pinned right side together. I'm then going to sew along this seam. Make sure whatever seam allowance you use, the finished cuff will be the same circumference as your sleeve. You can sew this on a regular sewing machine using a zigzag stitch, but I highly recommend using a serger if you have one. If you're sewing on a regular sewing machine, I recommend going over it twice, just to make sure all the lace is caught really nicely. After sewing the lace cuff, slide it over your sleeve or inside the sleeve depending on your preferences. I like to put it on the outside. Make sure you line up the seams, then you can pin all the way around. I like to hold my hand inside the cuff so I'm only pinning through that layer of the shirt. regular sewing machine, be sure you're using a stretch stitch. I like to practice on a swatch to make sure my tension is correct first. Then you can start sewing, starting at the seam and going all the way around. To sew the cuff, you're going to have to slide it over the free arm of your machine. As you're stretching it over, just make sure the pins are still staying in place. You can then start sewing, starting at the seam. When you get back to the seam, stitch over your original stitches for an inch or so to help hold them in place. With a zigzag stitch, you don't need to backstitch.